that has enabled me to not rely on memorization. So in high school, I was a 4.02 in high school, and I think I have achieved that. You're not starting from scratch, right? I even remember in your courses where you would say, if you have a shallow understanding, it's very easy for somebody to poke holes through your understanding. I ran out of time. That's a thing.
You're right.
I did well on the math portions, but I ran out of time.
Hi there. This is a conversation with Amir Elias, who is a licensed professional engineer in the US. Amir graduated from University of Illinois Chicago in 2016. He maintained a 4.0 GPA in his undergraduate studies, which is an amazing achievement regardless of whichever program you're pursuing, but it is extremely special in the engineering discipline. Amir has over 8 years of progressive experience. He has worked in different industries and carried out different roles and responsibilities. In this podcast, Amir shares tips, advice, and suggestions. I got to know Amir by virtue of my P Power exam preparation program. He used my exam preparation resources to pass the exam in the first attempt, and I was impressed by his attention to detail, intelligence, dedication, and desire to learn throughout that multi-month journey. And that's why after he passed the exam and became a PE and had some extra time, I requested him to hop on this interview with me. In this interview, Amir has shared some valuable advice. For high school students who are considering engineering as a profession in future, students who are currently enrolled in an electrical engineering program, want to maintain a high GPA, and seeking internships, co-ops, and summer work terms, folks who have recently graduated and want to get started in the job market, electrical engineers who've been working in the industry for some time, looking to level up their skill set, and even experienced professionals who want to get their career to the next level. I hope you will find this discussion as helpful, engaging, and interesting as I did when I interviewed Amir. So without further ado, let us get started. So, Amir, thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy schedule. You're an electrical engineer, you're in a leadership role, you're a professional engineer, and I got to know you and you got to know me by virtue of you going through your P Power exam preparation. You signed up for my program, prepared for the exam, and passed it in the first attempt. In this session, in this interview, in this podcast, in this episode, I want to basically go back in time a little bit and get to know about your journey as an electrical engineer, as a power systems engineer, and how things evolved for you over time. So let us go back to maybe your high school days as to why did you decide to pursue electrical engineering in the first place?
Yeah, thanks, Wasim. That's a good question. I think so. For engineering, I was heavily influenced by my dad. He just learned how to fix electronics. So ever since I was a young kid, he would work on these big TVs, and I always thought they were the little guys, in the TV, and they're like, acting inside the TV when I was a kid. And he would like kind of open it up and be like, "Oh, this is a transistor. This is a capacitor." And I was always amazed by his ability to like open a TV and know right away which component is not working. So he would be like, "Oh, the capacitor is not working," or he would always have a voltmeter. He would test. That was my early exposure to electrical engineering as a kid. In high school, I was good at math, so I was always good at calculations and things like that. And my brother-in-law is actually a civil engineer. I've always thought of civil engineering as being able to like draw very well. I don't know if you've seen the TV show. I think it's called Family Guys, or it's an '80s show. Well, not Family Guy though. No, I'm screwing it up. I don't remember the exact name, but no, not a cartoon. No, it's an '80s show that it has the guy from Back to the Future. I forgot his name as the main actor, and there's an architect, and she always had like drawings. So I always thought that's what civil engineering is about, and I'm like, oh, I can't draw very well. And so he was like, oh, if you're good at math, why don't you look into electrical engineering? And just connecting what I know about what my dad did, it kind of helped shape me and to go into that direction. So I really didn't know what I was getting into and I didn't realize how big the field of electrical engineering is and how expansive it is. But I walked into it thinking about probably the electronics component of it, which is the transistors, the that side of it.
Right. So you had good background in math and I assume physics as well, which is a big component of electrical engineering. So somebody who is thinking about electrical engineering and let's say they are in high school right now, Amir, based on your experience and will continue your journey into college, you went to a pretty good state school, I believe, right? University of Chicago, right? Is that right?
Yeah, University of
Yeah.
Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody who's contemplating has 4 or 5 different options, has probably narrowed down engineering as their choice of profession in the future. What can they do in their high school right now to make that transition from high school to college easy?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think honestly, engineering is an excellent field. Even if somebody is not sure about like what field to go into, that's always a safe bet. It's one of those majors where it's okay to figure out as you're going into college because I mean, at the end of the day, the money's there, right? Because all of us, we want to invest the time and money to go into college, and last thing you want is to graduate and not find yourself with a job. It's one of those fields where kind of no matter where you go, especially if you go into electrical engineering, it's such a diverse field where you always know that at the end of the day, there is that job that has the money. So it's okay to figure out in college. I think in high school, things you could do. I remember in the high school I went to, they had a program called Project Lead the Way, where you have electives in high school and you're able to take certain classes that exposes you to certain parts in the industry. And I remember taking classes on AND gates, OR gates, NAND gates, and things like that to try to kind of show you that exposure. I think we did early circuit analysis too. So I would encourage the students to kind of talk to their counselor, see, hey, what classes are there where I could start, taking that are engineering related, so I can see if that's something I'm interested in. So they both satisfy high school requirements for electives, but at the same time, not only gain knowledge, but see, is this something I enjoy or is this something that's not my forte? Because when you're doing it in high school, the risk is a lot minimal and taking those electives. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. You still got your elective and you're kind of, you refined your vision for where you want to go. So that's definitely my recommendation. Don't take your high school electives very lightly. Definitely try to be very purposeful with it, so you're hitting more than one bird with the stone that you're casting.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point because a lot of people in high school, they look for, I think they call them bird courses. Is that correct? Where you essentially sign up for courses where it's easy to help your overall average and result and percentage and GPA and all of that stuff, right? Which is obviously you got to be pragmatic about it. You should not just hit yourself up with so many tough courses that your overall average drops drastically. But the word that you use, purposeful, I think that is important because you want to use high school as a launching pad for your college career, get some early exposure. Before we move on from high school, I know for a fact that you did very well academically overall, even in your college. Any best practices, any routines, any habits that you'd like to share with other folks? And just to, jump a little bit ahead into the future, Amir is a 4.0 GPA, not from high school or college. You might have had 4.0 in high school as well, but from a very good engineering school, University of Chicago. So, any practical advice for high school students who are aspiring to become electrical engineers that can help them with their admissions as well and getting the entrance into a dream school that they're aiming for and the right discipline and everything.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a trait that has served me very well now that I look back at it, but I've always thought was a disadvantage. I'm really bad at memorization. If you ask me to memorize something, I struggle with it. I forget it. I rely heavily on my phone to like remind me of very benign things like pick up the trash cans when I take them out, and remind myself to bring them back because I will forget. That has enabled me to not rely on memorization. So in high school, I was a 4.02 in high school, and I think I have achieved that by I've always thought I'm bad at memorization, so I've always relied on trying to understand things versus memorize them. And it really, this was in all topics, whether it's biology, chemistry, when you have the chemical formulas where you add things and you add electrons, you subtract electrons. I never memorized anything. I always try to tell myself, can I derive this if I need to? And I've seen, the more I've done this, the more I've built a very strong foundation. So that has enabled me throughout the years. Yeah, I have a 4.0, but the way I achieved the 4.0 is whenever I have advanced, I was building on foundations I have built that are very strong. So I wasn't starting from the beginning with every course. If I'm taking calculus, I have very good algebra background. I have very good trigonometry background. I have never memorized anything. So if you tell me what's the area of a triangle, I'll sit there and try to make sense of it versus just memorizing the formulas. Which, funny enough, I didn't do well on the ACT for that purpose. I ran out of time. But with most exams, while people come to learn that in test taking, you have to learn how to be quick, and to a certain degree, that's good. Like in ACT, which is a standardized exam in the states. Some take the I forgot the other kind. I think it's called SAT, yeah. You will learn to like skim and then answer the question. And while that might get you a good grade on that, just know in the real world, you rarely do this. You rarely skim in the real world. Like when you turn things in, you need to be really mindful of the requirements. Did I meet them? You double check your work, you build in fat, and you build in, reserve. So I would encourage the teammates, learn how to like pass your test, but your core should be understanding the material and understanding those. Because if you're gonna get really good at taking tests by like hacking that process, yeah, you're gonna do good in high school, but or college. Then you go into the real world, which let's think about it, right? If you graduate at 22 and you're gonna work until 65, for the next 43 parts of your years, you need to be detail oriented versus quick, let me get a quick answer. So I'm not saying don't develop those skills, don't make this your core. And so I didn't get a 4.0 by hacking things. I actually got a 4.0 by understanding the material. Kind of like every class I took, I'm like, oh, I can teach a class on this. And to feel that way is a really good place to be. Because whenever you take future courses where you have to build on them, you're not starting from scratch, right? I even remember in your courses where you would say, if you have a shallow understanding, it's very easy for somebody to poke holes through your understanding because you just memorize things.
And when you're preparing for your P Power exam, I could clearly see the level of engagement and enjoyment and almost the thrill that you were getting out by unlocking, different concepts and working through the derivations. So that is the key to success. We are two of a kind. I took my academics in the same approach where I love to derive things from ground up. And, people around me, they know that I am not very good with my memory. And that is sort of intentional as well because I don't use my memory muscle as much as I do my ability to understand deeply, think critically and cross connect um, different concepts. So before we move on, the advice for high school students who are considering electrical engineering as a profession, future profession of choice as a career is number one, take meaningful coursework. Don't go for necessarily just the easiest courses. Get yourself exposed to things that can help you in college. And number two, don't take shortcuts. Take a first principle based learning approach and don't just essentially memorize, concepts with the expectation or goal of just spilling them out on the exam. And don't go for easy hacks in terms of um, improving your exam taking ability obviously is important, but that is not a skill that is going to carry over in the long run in your professional career. And we're going to further explore Amir's professional career, which has been amazing. So let's jump into your college. you got into University of Chicago, very good university, one of the best state schools in the US, and the engineering program is also very strong. Electrical engineering department that they have. How easy was it or difficult was it for you to get into University of Chicago?
So funny enough,
And when was it?
I
When did you
didn't get
enter?
in. So I entered in 2012, and I did not get accepted into the engineering program because I did not have a very good ACT score. Um,
Okay,
I
interesting.
I just I ran out of time. That's the thing.
You're right.
I did well on the math portions, but I ran out of time, especially on the reading and comprehension. English is my third language. So I moved to the states in 2008, and that's when I entered high school. And so when I took the ACT in 2011, I just ran out of time, and so they did not accept me into the engineering program right off the bat. I had to take a semester, first semester, and kind of prove my abilities, and then I would get reconsidered in the second semester. So, and the first year and a half in college, you're taking like English electives, things like that, before you get into the core classes. So, yeah, after the first semester, I had a 4.0 GPA, so I got accepted into the engineering program.
That's great. So, how was your life as a first year engineering student at University of Chicago?
It was good. I enjoyed it. It was, I had to, I was always a full time student, and I worked part time at Office Depot, kind of like their gig squad or the equivalent of their gig squad, to kind of bring in
Right.
some extra cash. But I enjoyed it. I thought, you guys, the classes are all different. Most of the classes, they are more, you got professors who are focused on research. And so the classes are
Of course.
bigger, and it's almost like it's self-paced. You no longer get the hand holding you get in college, sorry, in high school.
Yes.
You have to be self-motivated, and those professors are a wealth of knowledge. And you probably know from your experience with me in the class, I took advantage of that. So I would go to their office hours and I would ask them. And I've always realized I ask a question and then the answer ends up giving me 10 more questions because they go deep into those concepts. And then I
Right.
realized that generally speaking, you take a class and it's a very narrow class, and the actual body of knowledge is a lot bigger than that. And you can always
Right.
explore that. So oftentimes when I walked out of a class, I knew a lot more than what the class needed, which made getting the A really easy because I always took it as a learning opportunity. I'm like, if I'm going to invest my time and money, I might as well take the best out of it. So I didn't really like party and things like that. I've always valued knowledge and learning because I figured,
Right.
this is my opportunity.
Right. So, Amir, in terms of your coursework at during your engineering training, education, undergraduate studies, did you focus more heavily on certain aspects of electrical engineering, or did you keep it pretty broad? What was your approach? Like, at what point did you figure out the direction that your career was gonna take? Was it in third year, second year? And did you also do any internships, any summer work terms, or anything else that helped you sort of make that decision?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Wasim, and I think it's going to get me to a realization that I would like a lot of students to think about. And initially, I was taking a lot of electronics courses because that's what University of Chicago has. It's not very power focused. You can take some power classes, but it's mostly electronics and computer engineering. So I was taking these courses and I was doing very well. And I was seeing some of my other friends were getting internships in my sophomore year, and they were not. I was not. So I came to the realization that I was too focused on academics and I wasn't building my interpersonal skills, my networking skills, my ability to, in a way, advertise myself, right? Because I knew a lot, I just didn't know how to advertise that. And so that in sophomore year, I kind of, at the end of my sophomore year, I'm like, I need to focus on building my communication skills, building my network. That's when I started getting a little more active on LinkedIn, learning things and learning, hey, it's, the knowledge is only half of the journey. The other half is being able to communicate that and take that. And so in my junior year, we would have these recruiters that come and they would hold a career fair. And, I got an internship with a utility company. And that's when I became very fascinated with power engineering. They were talking about transmission lines and the voltage being up to 745,000. That blew my mind. I didn't know that was even possible, or why you need to have such high voltage, right? And so that got me really interested in power engineering. And I did they gave me the opportunity to do an internship. And you know, after taking that internship, I was in my junior year, and so which is like the end of my junior year. So coming into my senior year, which is my last year, I really liked the power internship. So I started looking at some power classes, and I took, I think, one or two power classes in my senior year to help me understand the power industry a little more. And so I thought I was going into electronics, and then when I saw the real world, I worked actually in my internship. I was in the I work with the testing group. So I was going with testing engineers, and we were testing relays, and we were going to substation and like making sure relays are working right. And they were actually showing me the older mechanical relays and how they worked, and I was very fascinated by it. And so I would say my senior year, I definitely know I wanted to go into the power and the utility industry. And I'm like, okay. And that kind of shows that even if you were taking courses that are not necessarily in your career, it's never too late to learn. Because at the end of the day, end of school is not the end of learning. Like when you start working, like you're always learning. If you stop learning, you don't grow. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good message for anybody. You don't have to have walked a perfect line of knowing what you want to do from freshman year to be able to work in that industry. You can feel free to explore and kind of expose yourself. And, as we talked earlier, you could do the exploration early on in high school to kind of see what you like or you don't like. And if you find that passion early on, it's good. If not, don't worry, you'll figure it out. So I would say, to answer your question in a shorter matter, I learned I wanted to do power in my senior year. I took a class or two, and then I kind of dove deep into my professional career to learn more about it.
And how long was your internship, Amir?
3 months.
3 months. And that 3 month, in my case, I have a similar story. I did my first internship, a summer work term with a utility again, and it just gave me so much to absorb in terms of how the industry works. What are the opportunities? What is it that the power systems engineers do? So, for those of you who are in college right now, so we addressed the scenario when you were in high school. Now we are moving into college. I would say that during your 4 years, which is the typical duration for undergraduate coursework, if you can get an exposure to hands-on engineering, internship, summer work term, co-op, their different names, placements, then go for it, because you will get an idea of what the life of a typical electrical engineer is, what are the different roles, different hats that they have to put on, and that exposes you to even the gaps in your understanding and knowledge. Then in your case, in your senior year, you consciously took some power systems courses. And obviously, it helps your resume as well, right, Amir? So when you finished up with a 4.0 GPA, undergraduate coursework, obviously the 4.0 is a big deal when it comes to engineering. On top of that, I'm pretty sure that the experience that you had in your school, during your internship, gave you some interesting talking points during interviews and probably got you a lot of interviews as well. Do you mind sharing that experience after graduation? How did you land up with your first job, and any tips and advice in helping folks who are recent graduates, new graduates, get a foot in the door?
Yeah, definitely. I would say I definitely agree with what you said, Wasim. I would even go as far as say seek those experiences. Try to make it a point to get an internship, to get a co-op. They're very important because they're very different from schoolwork. These are the experiences that actually shows you how real work happens in the world. You can be studying, and you learn a lot when you study, but when you take on that, you see things like safety, focus on safety, sheets, safety conversations. You just see things that you don't see in school, and you start to see the real world application of what you're learning and how it's very different. So I encourage that. There is a caveat with a 4.0 GPA in academics. 4.0 is very respected, is seen as like you're the you've mastered everything. It can come with a bit of a caveat in the workforce, because to a potential hiring manager, sometimes they see a 4.0 and they might think this person might have only focused on academics, so they're not very good communicators, or they might think they're not very good team players because they might think they already know it all because they have a 4.0. I know this from speaking with multiple recruiters, and also my brother-in-law has good amount of experience in the fields, and he has had experiences with 4.0 like that. So I always encourage, if you're the kind of student that actually does get a 4.0, just understand there is that. So working on your communication skills and your experience, and also understanding, just because you have a 4.0, it does not mean you're going to go into work and you know everything. I guarantee you don't. Somebody who has 10 years experience knows a lot more than you, and you should be like a sponge and continue to like absorb that knowledge. So my advice is, seek that professional experience. It means more than you think. Be humble, and just show a hunger for learning. And I think anybody who's experienced and who has a heart of a teacher would appreciate that about you, and they would actually teach you. And oftentimes when I tell people, it's not, don't learn techniques or ways to just be marketable. Actually be that way, kind of like I was reading, how do you how are some ways to become an active listener, and the first thing was actually actively listen, instead of just focusing on, making eye contact and nodding. Actually learn how to do the thing itself, because it's useful, versus just pretending to do it just to become marketable or get the job or get the thing. So I would say, have an open mind, be hungry to learn, and actually seek out opportunities to get things. Apply to 100 applications, add recruiters on LinkedIn, reach out to them, show interest in the companies you want to work in. Because when you do that like work up front, it makes it so much easier to actually get that opportunity.
That's great. So, Amir, what was your first job after graduation?
I actually ended up working at the utility I interned with. I graduated in
That's
May
great.
2016, and they gave me an offer in October 2015. So I got my
Okay.
offer 7 months before graduation. And
Yeah.
I set up my schedule where my last semester I was only taking 2 classes because I was going to focus on job applications and things like that. And I actually ended up having a job. So I just, my last semester, I actually got to have more of the college experience where I went out more, I hang out more with people, and
Right.
I did things that I couldn't do previously because I was taking 5 classes a semester.
Right. That's amazing. Another reason to seek out those internships, co-ops, work terms, because a lot of times they can actually translate into full-time job offers even before you graduate. So that's a great story. So how long did you work with the utility then?
I worked there for about 3.5 years. So I worked there from June 2016 until October 2019.
Okay. And what were the things that stood out for you in terms of big differences between what you learned at school, and this is an open, broad question, and what you saw in the field? It can range from your realization that, okay, you know what, only 20-30% of technical stuff that I learned is applicable, and then the rest is either irrelevant or something new that I have to learn. The dynamics, right? The teamwork, even the bureaucracy, because in utilities I know they're notorious for a lot of paperwork, a lot of procedural stuff, and there's good reason to do that. You mentioned emphasis on safety, especially in the field. um, and a lot of these things are not taught, right? And also cooperation, and sometimes when you go higher in leadership and management, which will be my next topic of discussion with you, sometimes even compromises in terms of budget, in terms of you want things to be done in a certain way. Maybe in the first 3 years you probably didn't get exposure to those aspects of life as an electrical engineer, But the early 3 years, right after graduation, what were the big observations and even adjustments that you had to make in order to position yourself for success?
Yeah, definitely. I started as a design engineer, and I realized I don't know anything when I started. Um, it was very interesting. I had a very good mentor. He got his degree in Russia, and he got his degree here too. So he was like in his later years. He was ready to retire in like 2 3 years. But he talked very directly. But he would like look at something I designed, and he's like, "Oh, this is garbage," and he would like throw it. He was like that blunt. But he kind of humbled me in my well lack of knowledge. But I learned a lot. I Some of the things that do stand out to me is that I learned like there's considerations that you have to make in the real world that you really don't make much when you're in school or when you're like doing stuff in school. For example, yeah, consideration for safety, taking this very, very, very seriously. Like they have like rules for life. Like you got to test before you touch. Um, you even when you're in substation, I remember you covered in your course how people walk like penguins, and understanding potential voltage and things like that. I mean, these are real things, and for electricity is very unforgiving. So you don't get to make too many mistakes like this and walk away safely. So you realize that early on. The other thing you realize is also there is like stakeholders and the customer part of things. So you might think, oh, to replace something, you take down a transformer and you just put up a bigger transformer to accommodate the load. But you got to think about, oh, service interruption, how many customers are going to go out, how long will they go out for, what if they have a patient who needs 24-hour electricity, do we need to send out notices, do I need to communicate with those customers, is there a way to parallel the service so I don't have to take customers out. You learn these things that you don't necessarily think about when you're designing and doing things in school, or just thinking about problem solution. The other thing I learned is building fat into what you're doing. So in school you focus on these exact numbers. So you find a cable size and you're like 4-aught, and then you circle that. In the real world it's like, oh, 4-aught, well, let me put a little bigger cable just in case something else happened, or just in case there's going to be capacity expansion in the future. So you learn it's not so much about the exact number. It's good to find the exact number, but from there, you need to think, oh, will there be expansion? Will there be other things that come up? Could there be something that I didn't consider? So when I started, that's like the things I realized. In school, you get a quick answer. Did you solve it right? Did you solve it wrong? There's only one right answer. In the real world, it's not like that. It's more very open ended. Your solution is only as good as if it stands the test of time. Nobody's going to tell you, oh, that solution is right away. Congratulations, you got an A. So that's a very different realization that I realized when I started as a design engineer.
And the other thing I'd like to add to that, Amir, that my personal experience, maybe yours is similar as well. We all deal with humans, we are all human beings, right? Even when you have a correct answer, just the fact that you have a correct answer, you cannot always bulldoze through things, right? You have to work with personalities, you have to work with individuals, you have to present your case in a way that is conducive, to that individual, right? That gets the buy in. So essentially, getting the buy in from stakeholders, I personally found that when I entered the workforce initially, I thought that, okay, my analytical skills, my ability to use tools and spreadsheets, fancy formulas, they're going to get me convince people the facts and the figures, right? That is true. I mean, if your calculations, if your facts and figures are wrong, you don't even stand a chance. You're going to be shot down, correct? But the realization, at least on my end, and feel free to add to that, was that even when your facts and figures are right, you actually have to present them in a persuasive manner. Again, coming back to communication skills and the stereotypes associated with 4.0 academically inclined, let me just call it out as nerdy students, right? So you still have to have those skills where you are able to communicate effectively. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, Wasim, you are 100% correct. I couldn't overstate this. Yeah, be careful. Even if you think you know the right answer, just remember, especially if you're early on in your career, there might be things you're not considering. So please be open minded, ask everybody. Not only, even if you're right, not only does that, you might win the battle, but you're going to lose the war. You're going to think, oh, I got the right answer. Look at me, I'm so smart. Everybody else in the room is going to hate you because, well, you're going to come off very arrogant. But also, there might be things you're not considering. You might be looking at this in a single dimension, and somebody else could have another thing, another factor that can flip the answer over. So 100% communication and collaboration, you're going to come to realize is extremely important. I remember watching this movie Goal, and this thing always stuck in my head, where the coach asked the player to run and score a goal, and after 3 or 4 or 5 times, he's like, okay, he was passing the ball. The coach was passing the ball to another teammate, and after running it 3 or 4 times, he realized passing the ball was much faster than this teammate could ever run and do it themselves. Just to show the idea of teamwork. And as I said, a lot of these things, they could sound like corporate things, or, oh, these are hacks on how to show myself as being, important. And yeah, you might get the job because you're saying the right things. But if you don't do this in the real world, if you actually don't implement these things, you're going to pay very, very, very much for them. And just another example too, I remember there was a campaign where USPS tried to improve the accuracy of their deliveries, and they were doing something like they were delivering to the right address 96% of the time, and they wanted to drive this up to 98%, and that is very difficult to do. And then they surveyed a bunch of people thinking, hey, how often do you think USPS delivers right? And most people, the average answer was 20%. So the whole public thinks you only deliver packages to the correct address 20% of the time. You don't need to be allocating your resources to taking it from 96 to 98. You need to allocating you to resources to advertise better, so you change the public perception, because that's the biggest return on that investment. And that's where communication is key. You could be the smartest person, but if you don't learn how to communicate this, if you don't learn how to show your value, it doesn't matter. Nobody's gonna go into your mind and read it. You're gonna have to learn how to actually sell yourself.
Are you preparing for FE Electrical or PE Power exam and looking for effective exam preparation resources to help you succeed? You don't need to look further than studyforfe.com. And here's a special offer just for our listeners. You can use the discount code SFE10 at the checkout to get 10% discount on all course offerings for FE Electrical and PE Power. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to being part of your PE licensing journey. Yeah, that's amazing example. So let us transition into your next role, your next job. So up until 2019, you were with the utility. And then when did you transition? How did the opportunity come up? And how did you basically grow in that new role?
Yeah, so that was a leap of faith. I was, I did very well in the utility industry, and uh, at the 3.5 year mark, things started to get a little repetitive. I think you did mention it too, and I remember in one of the classes where you find yourself. Also, the thing about the utility is, I don't want to say they're set in their ways, but it takes a long time to implement a change, and so oftentimes you're kind of doing things, and things can start to get a little repetitive. And so, I was learning things, but I also I was kind of like, I wanted to see what else is out there. One of my friends, he went to school with me, and he's older than me, so he was kind of getting his engineering degree to supplement his career. And so he told me about an opportunity at the hospital where there was an opening, and he said that, you're very good analytically, you're very good operationally, and I think you'll do amazing to improve operations in this role. So I kind of took a leap of faith, and I left the utility, and I went to work for Northwestern Hospital as a engineering operations manager. And I took a leap of faith because I didn't know anything walking into that role. I don't know anything about hospital operations. I have never worked in a hospital. I couldn't tell you a single thing about it. And that's why I said I took a leap of faith. He got me the interview by recommending me. And, after doing 2 interviews, they were just impressed by my ability to demonstrate what I've done, and they kind of recognize, like, oh, this guy does sound like he's good. And they also took a leap of faith on me because they kind of were given the role to somebody who's less experienced in that industry, somebody who never worked in the hospital before. And so I took a huge leap of faith taking that role. That's how I got in it.
If I look at your career as a milestone, going from high school to university, getting into the University of Chicago, right? You didn't directly get into it, but you proved yourself academically and then graduated with the 4.0. Opportunities, you either made them happen or came your way, right? Your internship was something that you latched on, utilized it, and obviously did well enough that they ended up giving you a full-time job offer before you even graduated. You spent your time 3.5 years learning core technical content as an electrical engineer, as a design engineer, and as soon as you found that things were starting to get repetitive, in order to do something different, something new, so to continue your hunger, which you mentioned earlier, this opportunity came up at the right time and it was a leap of faith, right? The hospital, your employers essentially gave you the opportunity. Obviously, they were impressed. And your second job was through network. I want to, now have a little bit of a discussion about the importance of networking, especially when you grow. A lot of people think that, okay, I'm going to do well in school, I'm going to be that uh, good student, and all of a sudden, I'll get the best job, I'll get the promotions and everything. So you have to keep your eyes and ears open. You have to be talking to others within the industry about your aspirations, where you want to be. And people keep in mind, especially if you are delivering results, there is a severe shortage of folks who can get things done. I think that is applicable to any industry or even entertainment, right? You watch sports and whatnot. Why is it that Messi or Ronaldo or LeBron, all of these people, athletes are given the top dollar? Because they can get things done. And same goes for the top doctors, top engineers, top lawyers, top artists, and everything. So that realization that, okay, I am technically now sound and I'll continue to grow technically, but at the same time leveraging your network, developing interpersonal skills, right? And landing management. What was your title over here? And manager, right? At the Northwestern Hospital.
Engineering
Manager of what?
operations manager.
Engineering
Engineering
operations
operations manager.
manager. Right. And you obviously get to deal with a lot of people, different stakeholders. So, can you walk me through that transition, that you were capitalizing on your technical skill set, and how did you mold yourself into that role where you were dealing with multiple stakeholders while maintaining the network, the connections, and those individuals that you were reliant upon?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I just to piggyback on your point with Simon communication. Um, Communication and building your network is the most important thing you will do, because this translates to real world value or real world opportunities. Again, I don't want people to take it as I need to build my network so I can land things I'm not qualified for. That's definitely not the message. But if you ever see somebody who's in a role and you're like, this person is not qualified, they don't know what they're talking about, I don't know how they got that role, through connections. That's how. That's the answer to anything. If you even ask yourself,
That's true.
you're getting married and you're like, oh, how did you find your florist? You weren't on Googling florist. You ask a relative who recommend them to you. It's the same in the professional world. If somebody recommends, that recommendation, especially if it comes from somebody they know, weighs a million times better. That's at a minimum will get you an interview. Now, once you get the interview, you're on your own. You gotta do it, right?
Yeah.
But getting that interview is extremely hard, because
Yeah.
if you have 100 applicants, especially on LinkedIn applications, you see 2,000 people applied. Nobody's going to go through all of these applications, or nobody's going to do it. So that network is immensely useful. I can't even emphasize that. And so when I got into the role, I made some mistakes early on, which were it was the first role where I actually had people reporting to me, and I was not a servant leader, in which case I kind of thought, oh, I'm a manager. I have to dictate how things are run. And so I went into a sprint of learning very quickly how the different roles are. And I was kind of, in a way, sending commands or try to restructure things quickly. and I failed miserably. I did not realize it until 9 months in, where I had another colleague who had more experience, and they were moving to Florida, and he told me, "I know I could lose." He's like, "I really appreciate you as a colleague, a friend, and I know I could lose you as a contact for telling you this, but you really need to hear it. Everybody thinks you're a joke, and nobody takes what you're saying seriously." And that hit me really hard. I went into like the 5 stages of grief after hearing that feedback, but it changed my approach. It humbled me in realizing, well, how little I know, and it taught me a very valuable lesson. Just because you have the title doesn't mean you have the respect. It doesn't mean anything. Um, the respect comes with people actually respecting you, regardless of your title. You could be a leader without the title of a leader, and you could have a title of a leader and not be a leader. It does not matter. And so I I changed 360. Like after the first year, I was, and especially it did also happen. Funny enough, because I joined in October, and then COVID happened in March 2020, and the hospital was having very specific demands with X and Y and Z needs to happen to accommodate the hospital or accommodate the circumstances. Some things we could have just done, and some things we had to re-engineer everything or return rooms to accomplish it. And that's where I think that also contributed to the more directive approach I took. But yeah, after a year later, those are very hard lessons to learn. But that's really when you learn, when you go through hardships. I changed my approach completely. When we do like generator testing overnight, I went and I walked with the engineers and I tried to learn it. I moved my office from in the in a nice building where they rented the space to. I started sitting in the basement where the stationary engineers were and tried to talk to them and learn from them. And I became more of a colleague or a friend rather than just a person. I'm here and you're here and I'm going to tell you what to do. That helped me immensely. And the next 2 years they were a lot better. I noticed a difference. People were telling me things. I started to see things that go wrong. When things are not going right, people were coming and they're telling me directly. They were not afraid to say like, "Oh, this wasn't going well," or "This was going well," and that helped me with my uh, actually client conversations where I had to have to talk about deliverables, talk about how we're doing, all of these things. It helped me deliver better because I became more of a colleague and a team player with the people that report to me versus I'm here, you're here, you listen to what I tell you. So that was probably my biggest growth through my career. That 1 year from 2019 to end of 2020.
Right. And anybody who has listened to this interview thus far can right away identify a couple of things about you, Amir. And, I know this from a long time. You are an intelligent, smart person, but you are equally emotionally intelligent, right? So, making these observations, you don't need to be a 4.0 student or you don't need to be like a superstar in your domain. You just need to be perceptive. You need to be open to feedback. Like this particular individual who gave you this honest feedback, right? He put his friendship acquaintance online and told you that maybe you may not talk to me ever again. On your end, you absorbed it, okay, contemplated on it. You went through that five stages of, as you mentioned, what, depression or grief, 5 stages of grief, but you took the corrective actions, right? This is very important as much as your credentials, and we'll quickly touch base on your credentials and then wrap it up. As much as your degree, as much as your diplomas, as much as your titles and credentials are going to help you go places, once you reach certain status, a certain role, how effective you are in that role is going to determine your future trajectory. I know great things are happening in your career, right? You just became a licensed professional engineer and you are slotted for promotions and bigger and better things. Um, can you tell me how one should position himself, herself, themselves when they have reached a certain career? Let's say this advice is somebody for who is now a professional engineer and wants to make things happen.
Yeah, 100%. Wasim, it goes to back to if you have the right network, so you understand, how things are going. I would tell you this: if you are an engineer and you're experienced, and the PE caused you to double your salary, that's a good thing. But also know you have been probably underpaid for a while because you didn't do a good job advertising yourself. You didn't do a good job showing your experience. Just remember, a lot of these tools, a PE would, yes, a PE will give you credential. It will open a ton of doors for you, and it will show your value in the marketplace. That does not change the fact that you still need communication skills. You need to be able to sell yourself, and you need to be able to show the value you bring, because a PE alone will not do it. It just will not. A PE is very good. It shows that credential, but you need to learn how to sell yourself. You need to learn how to demonstrate how good you are. And remember, in order for you to do that, you first need to be good, and you need to be able to demonstrate it, which gets me to an important career thing for people. When you start your career on, your focus should be learning. If you're making good money, that's good. That's just a cherry on top. Your focus should be learning, because you want to position yourself in a way where when you're 35, 36, 37 years old, you're a subject matter expert. Because once you have built that subject matter expertise and you have built your communication skills, now you're playing in the major league. You're making the quarter million, the half million, because your respect will go through the roof. Not only are you a person who has interpersonal and EQ, emotional intelligence, you have the technical experience to back up the decision you make. Oftentimes, if you see CEOs, they're lawyers, or what's the difference between that lawyer and a different lawyer? Well, that lawyer worked on their interpersonal skills and learned the business side of things, and now they're a CEO. So they rely on their law background and law training to make better decisions. So my biggest advice is, if you got a job that gives you 50K and a job that pays you 60K, but that 50K job is in an industry that's evolving, that will enable you to learn a lot more, take that role. That 10K will not make a difference. But when you're 35, it becomes a matter of somebody making 100K and somebody making 250,000. And that decision you made early on to take learning up front would pay its dividend. It's the things it's what you reap. And so I can't emphasize this enough. Please focus on learning upfront, because this will help. That's the investment that you'll make will pay in the future. Again, that's not to say don't learn to advertise yourself. And if you're being taken advantage of and you say, oh, I just need to get my PE, and then they'll see how much I know, you're looking at PE the wrong way. You're trying to use the PE to compensate for your communication skills, for your talking ability, because there are people without PE, without engineering degree, that are in better roles and making more money. That just shows it's not just about the credential. Use it to your advantage. Don't use it as a compensation. That's just my best piece of advice.
That's an amazing advice. That's an amazing advice, Amir. So continue to grow, continue to learn the hard skills, the real skills, develop expertise, knowledge, foundation, and at the same time focus on your network, emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, communication skills, ability to persuade with people, be receptive in getting honest, blunt feedback, and take that as a precursor for improvement and action that can help you get things done and improve. I'd like to close out this discussion, and to be honest, I myself have learned a lot during this interview. That example you gave about USPS, I've heard similar things, like a couple of books in which I read about in Atomic Habits about the British cycling team and how they worked on small improvements, and you have to focus on you know in things that can make a huge impact, right? High leverage activities, high yielding results, not necessarily just pigeonholing yourself in one direction and continuously like trying to get from 96 to 98 when 20% of the people, only 20% think that you are doing your job. So in terms of opportunities that are out there in the industry, and as you are growing in your role and you got your PE power, you went through my program, became a licensed engineer, What do you see happening in the industry over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see it stagnating? Do you see it growing at the ground level? Now you're a senior manager, and you are going places. When you are looking for individuals who can get things done, folks who have experience or who are developing experience, what type of future do you see for power systems engineers who are either deciding to enter in this field right now, going to the university and education, or are in earlier phases of their education, or even folks who have experience and the credentials? Why would you recommend somebody to proceed with power systems engineering and develop and grow within this industry?
Yeah, for sure. I think power systems engineering, it's a very vast field. Um, there is a lot you could do with this. It's literally more than you can imagine. It depends on what field you want to go into. For me personally, after the hospital, I kind of got burnt out after the 3 years. It was a lot. It was a huge team, over 120, and I was working probably 60, 70 hours a week. So I was ready to kind of take things a bit slower because it was taking a toll on my health. I do appreciate it. It was very good. It was just getting a little too much for me to try. And hospital operation is 24/7, and so I could get a text at 7 a.m. on Saturday to say, "Oh, our boilers are not starting. Our cooling towers are down." And this is a hospital. They got ORs, they got surgeries, all that. It started to get a little too much. To like it was taking a toll on my health. But again, I wouldn't trade this experience for anything. This has really built my character. I went into telecom, and some people might not even think about telecom. What even is telecom? It's the small niche within utilities. It was a very good opportunity, and I could realize my existing utility experience and work into management. And so I'm like, oh, this role will help me learn how to manage. It'll help me learn the permitting side of things. I didn't have a lot of experience in permitting, but also um, it's not very it's rare to get paid well, have a high salary, but also learn something from the ground up like permitting, right? Because you're usually being hired for your experience at these roles. So it enabled me to use my utilities experience and deliver value to the organization, but at the same time learn a different thing like even regulatory and how those apply in telecom and in telecom deployment on utility poles, on street lights, or even privately. And that helped me kind of learn but also earn. And these are the sweetest spots, right, where you're still learning a lot and you're getting paid. This is the perfect scenario. And so where can you go? Anywhere you want. What would you like to do? Do you want to get into renewables? I see a lot of opportunities with renewables. I have friends who have maybe 4 or 5 years only experience in renewables, and they're able to land very impressive technical roles, and they're still making a lot of money. I personally like people. I think my academic background proves that I have the technical abilities, but I like working with people. That's my passion. I like taking somebody and developing him to a leader. I like to lead leaders. I like to lead individual contributors, and I like to deliver value like that at a macro scale. That's what I'm passionate about. I'm still passionate about learning, but like learning the technical things because that's just my nerdy side of being an engineer. But I also like to lead people. So that's the direction I want to take. Um, Other people can go into renewables. They can go into a utility. They can take a safe route. My brother actually is an electrical engineer, and he likes to just be an individual contributor. Don't bother me. I just want to do my role and go back to my family. And I want to put in 8 hours a day and go home. And you could do that too. That's the beauty of power engineering. It's not a niche. It's like nursing. You could work on the floor. You could work in labor and delivery. You could be a home health nurse. My wife is a nurse. She goes to a patient and she works one on one with them. The world is your oyster, how they say it, and that's the beauty about power engineering. And if you get your PE, that on paper very quickly distinguishes you as a technical expert. That's kind of like the friend that helps you with the interview. Now, once you get in or once you get that interview, you need to be able to communicate your knowledge because remember, when they interview you, they're going to say, do I want to spend 40 hours a week with this guy? And no matter how knowledgeable you are, if they don't want to do that, they will not, they will not hire you because they don't think you're a right fit. Even if you're skilled, they might say, but you're not the right fit. So my advice, yeah, power is a beautiful field. It's very large. And if you look at my example, I'm working in telecom, which is a very small niche. It's a very specific niche. And you might think, oh, it's just communication cables on a pole or it's a small cell. No, that alone is also its own world with regulatory permitting, rules, engagement, stakeholders, influence. And even me going into that role thinking, oh, I did really well in utility. This is going to be a piece of cake. I'm going to I know everything. And no, I was very surprised. It's a very detailed and big world. So even in the small things, it's kind of like one of those paintings on Instagram where they show you a painting and they zoom on a little thing and within that thing has another painting. I don't know if you've seen these videos. It's like that. That's the power world. Even when you think something is small, it's the whole world. So honestly, you will have your pick to where you want to go, and you can jump around and not have a problem because, well, you're an engineer. You're always in demand.
Exactly. Thanks a lot for your time, Amir. It was really enlightening for me as well. And I hope that the phases that we went through of your career thus far helps the viewers and the listeners get an idea of what it takes to have a remarkable career. And you're just getting started. You just got your P license. You've had exposure to three very interesting, sort of overlapping, but at the same time unique industries, and in each role you have excelled, you have performed, and basically grown, and technically you're sound. From the standpoint of interpersonal skills, we discussed the importance of communications, networking, and willingness to grow and learn on all fronts: technical, non-technical, interpersonal, because these are the skills in the long run that are going to make the difference. Your recommendation regarding focusing on learning, at least in the first few years of your career, the example that you gave, $50,000 per year versus $60,000 per year, 20% difference in earning potential. But if the 50K job gives you more of a runway to learn, that is a better option, because 5, 10, 15 years down the road, if you didn't make the right choices and accumulate the skills that were in demand and did not grow, the difference would be not 50 and 60, it would be 100 and 250, or maybe even higher. So play the long game, enjoy the journey, tons of opportunities. And as you said, you cannot go wrong with power systems engineering, with electrical engineering. Thanks again for your time. It was great having you. And I wish you best of luck, Amir.
Thank you, Wasim. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for listening to this podcast. I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn for regular updates and more. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for next topics, please send me a message at support@studyforfe.com. See you soon in the next episode. Thank you.